some technical difficulties if it's not obvious by the fact that it's 6:15 for us to even get started. So I'm going to go a few minutes later. I always go a few minutes late anyway, so it doesn't change anything on that. But I am on my own at the moment until Bob comes in. So I have a wide open microphone to just say what I've always wanted to say without it being questioned, and I have no idea what that would be. My intention for today's show was to talk about something that came up. Wow, I'm not having a very articulate day. Something that came up last week after PZ was on the show with us. That video on YouTube has gotten several views and comments. Specifically, a lot of people have been very actively involved in that. And even when I was recruiting and looking out to find other people to be part of the series that we're doing on Is Church Harmful, there's something that I specifically wanted to address within the atheist community. And realistically, it's across the board. But this is something that probably a lot of people don't know unless you are an active internet atheist in the way that I am. So we atheists do tend to congregate in ways and have sort of communities ourselves. I know it may sound religious in a way in that respect, and I guess in a way it might be, but there's been a schism within our community as well. So even atheists are not immune to such ideological differences. I find this really interesting, and it's something that I wanted to devote some time to this week, because specifically the question is PZ Myers, as well as several other people, the Free Thought blogs website hosts many different blogs from skeptics, atheists, scientists, and things of that nature. So it looks like Bob is available now, so he may be coming in. Bob, are you with me?
I'm there. Hopefully I'm there without too much crackle. I can't tell. Does it sound normal to you now?
It does, and you can hear me okay?
I can, yeah. So I had to
I'm going to basically
there was something on.
give you an intro on what I was just talking about, Bob, because this is something I'd like your input on. I was discussing that within the atheist community, and specifically the online, the blogging networks and things that we've established, there has been a schism. And I was talking with Dr. Jones about this earlier today. I find it interesting for that respect alone, that even a community that is as amorphous as simply being united by non-belief in any gods still has community elements and divisive ideologies that come about. And this manifested last week with the PZ Myers show, as I was looking for people to be on for our Is Church Harmful series, and in the comments on the YouTube, there's a lot of people who are, or a lot of atheists who are very much in line with PZ's way of thinking and the free thought blogs and things of that nature. I count myself among them, but there's a completely separate school of thought within the atheist community, which I find this concept fascinating. But just the fact that there is this a rivalry of sorts, and it really basically breaks down to sort of a ideological or social left versus right. PZ very openly calls himself a godless liberal. He's very left-wing, as I have self-identified in the past as a socialist. So I'm more than happy to admit that. But the question is not on economics per se, or anything of that nature. It really boils down to social activism. There's a program that was developed now called Atheism Plus, which is atheists with a mission similar to myself that want to do more than just promote acceptance of atheists and promote skepticism and secularism in the world, but also socially positive activism, very specifically race relations, poverty, and sexism, and feminism are things that are important, very important with these crowds. There's several atheist bloggers, Greta Christina, Rebecca Watson that I would love to get on the show at some point, even during this Is Church Harmful series, to talk about the questions that we are, or that do divide people even within this group. So it helps. It's a bit of a case study in that respect, in saying, is church harmful, or is it just that people tend to divide themselves?
But yeah, it's kind of weird. I was going to say that it sounds to me like you folks need Jesus. No, just kidding. No, I if I could speak to that somewhat, I get the impression that that there's a how can I put this? I think that reality is so large that it's unmanageable. And this is one thing that I think that I find very meaningful in chaos theory, is that the concept of chaos is not that everything is just nonsensical, but that there are so many variables involved that nobody can really manage it all. And the reason why some things are not predictable is not because they are not determinedly so, but because everything is just so complex that we don't know all the factors involved. Now, along those same lines, although I wouldn't necessarily go as far as chaoticians do in thinking that everything is that determined, I would agree with them that everything is that complicated. As a result, I'm of the theory that every single human being, in order to manage their affairs, has to put on a lens. They have to look at reality. They have to look at the world. They have to look at their lives through a lens that helps them organize things and put them into categories. And then we forget we're wearing the lens. We grow so accustomed to it. It's kind of like taking your glasses off and you can't walk up the stairs because they're in the wrong place. You get so accustomed to seeing the world through the lenses you look through that's just the world to you. And I think that what happens is that whether you're a person of faith or not a person of faith, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you're looking at the world and making sense of it through this lens. And you're kidding yourself by thinking that this lens is reality. And so I think that the lenses are useful. I think they're necessary. But I think that all of us use a lens that reduces the complexity of reality, puts it into a little bit more manageable space, and then we take ourselves seriously. This is one of the reasons why I recommend something that I call multi-axialism. And that is that I see reality as an optical illusion, as it were. It can validly appear to be many different ways depending on which lens you're using. And so I recommend that people try to find a way of being able to see the world through more than one lens and appreciate how real it seems through either lens, even though the way they're thinking through each lens and the way they make sense of things through each lens is incompatible. I don't know. What does that sound like to you?
I think that you're really hitting that on the head with specifically the lens, the worldview, the multi-axialism, and I think that you're absolutely right that people forget that they do look at the world through a lens, and that's a problem that we all face. I think I talked in the past about the website that's called yourmorals.org. That it was a really eye-opening experience for me to go through that. It's related to a book and a series of experiments and social or sociologists doing studies that relate to the values that we use to make decisions in the way that we see the world. And before I took that, this literally was it was a watershed moment for me. It was a life-changing event to take that quiz, because it really opened up it opened up my eyes to being able to see what other people can see and how they can do it. It's right. I don't know what to
we all manage the world through a paradigm rather than through a direct observation. Yeah. And, I think that when we find ourselves in fundamental disagreement with someone else, before we just start, criticizing them radically. I think that sometimes we have to ask ourselves, I wonder if what lens one could wear that would make this something that an intelligent person would think and conclude. That's not always the case with every argument you might hear, but it can be the case many times. And I think that when you're dealing with atheists, more often than not, the atheists who are outspoken are well educated. They're not stupid people. So when you see these disagreements, I think that in many ways they're having that trouble getting on the other lens.
That is one thing that I have noted, though, is that you use the term educated and intelligent, or the terms educated and intelligent, and the two are not necessarily connected. One can be extremely intelligent and not educated, and one can be extremely educated and not particularly intelligent. So,
Yeah.
as a personal anecdotal story, I spent and mind you, this person that I'm talking about is very intelligent and also very educated. Has a doctorate, and is now, I'm admittedly a doctorate in chiropractic, but this this education that they went through has shaped and molded the way that they see the world in such a way that I have been in lengthy debates this week with a friend of mine who is trying to convince me that germ theory of illness is not accurate, that it's fundamentally flawed, and that when we find these germs, they are proliferating because of something going wrong, and internally, and it's only when things fall out of balance. It's hokum. It's complete and utter.
And this is the chiropractor making the statement.
It is. It's a.
I don't know if you knew
Something
this,
that is
but
very common in
there,
alternative medicine.
yeah, in alternative medicine, yes. One of the things there are a few different theories of chiropractic. Some that are more recent, but originally chiropractic was worked upon a theory that, although, by the way, I've gone to chiropractors and I think that they do wonderful work. And when I used to teach karate and jujitsu, and making use of a chiropractor from time to time was extremely helpful. But originally, chiropractic theory had this theory of disease that rested upon the notion that the spine, when the subluxations, when various things were out of alignment, that everything is not running smoothly and up to snuff, and that this creates weaknesses, and that it's these weaknesses that are the root cause of disease, not not the other things. The germs wouldn't affect you if you were, So there's a sense in which there's some new chiropractors that realize that's almost an embarrassing theory, but they realize that there is a great deal of benefit in the manipulation of and articulation of various different joints in the body that do get kind of stuck. And so they have a different theory, but I don't know how much that would be a part of it, but I'd be curious.
That actually, it's very, very strongly associated. That's the school of thought you were discussing initially is the one he's coming from. That it's all about your body's out of balance, your immune system can't properly work, and the only thing that causes illness is an improperly functioning immune system. As if your immune system can handle anything and everything thrown at it. He's also very strongly anti-vaccination.
Right.
And
You might find Eric
question,
Hovind more reasonable.
in some ways, what the question that I have for him is if vaccines don't work, what happened to smallpox?
Yeah.
It's
No, I got to be honest with you. Some vaccines, I have my doubts about, but I don't have my doubts about the concept of vaccine. You know, whether or not the mercury that's in some of them is really as safe as they say or as they claim, I have my doubts. Every field that involves money can have its corruptions, but the basic scientific concept that the body can be prepared to fight off other illnesses that's awesome. I mean, we're living most of us a great deal longer than we used to because of vaccines and other things like that. Yeah.
It's I guess we got off the topic that I wanted to talk about a little bit, but that has been a big one for me this week too. It's a big issue in my book when anybody makes alternative medicine claims. However, when somebody who is in a medical role, somebody who actually is educated and could call himself doctor, um, is making these claims, that's far more dangerous in my book. That's it, borderline irresponsible.
In the level of intelligence that a person has really determines the sophistication of the models they can build. It doesn't do anything to determine whether or not they are being honest, whether or not they're being accurate, whether or not they're thinking clearly. Many of the fallacies operate not just because we didn't understand the proper terms of logic, but many times they operate because of the way that certain emotional investments work against us, or certain assumptions we've never really worked through that feel uncomfortable to us. And so there's a very strong emotional element to the way that they operate, you know.
You'll find actually there's studies out there that show intelligence is strongly correlated with crazy beliefs. Yeah, as funny as that might sound, you'd think that, oh, somebody's really, really intelligent, they couldn't possibly believe things that are, absolutely off the wall conspiracy theories or the variety, just about any crazy belief. The more intelligent you are, the more likely it is to take root, because a lot of these crazy beliefs are pretty complicated to even understand before you can
Right.
accept them. And the more intelligent you are, particularly in conversations with other people, the more you get positive feedback, because it's easier to talk your way around other people and convince
Right.
them to agree with you. So then you get affirmation in that respect. Plus, the smarter you are, the better you are at justifying and rationalizing things.
And the harder it
And
is for people who are not as intelligent as you to catch you in a spin. One of the most difficult people to work with, if you're a therapist, is a highly intelligent, troubled person, because they have such a the, you've until you can discover the way they've actually woven their problem together, you don't have credibility with them, because you're saying things they might actually know to be false, and so it's or that they just have good reason for not trusting. So intelligence, in some ways, also isolates a person from the normal reality checks of standard culture, because you're at a level, if you're a more intelligent person, you have to almost develop the ability to recognize when you're talking to somebody who doesn't really deal with issues in a complex way, and you kind of have to humor them, and you stop taking them seriously, or things like that. It becomes very arrogant, and yet what's the alternative? You can't be gullible. And so anyway, intelligence isn't everything it's cracked up to be.
we had just had a viewer comment, and it's something that I believe I've mentioned on here before, but it's worth repeating. Um, People that are iconic for their intelligence are still people who are very vulnerable to these very unusual ways of thinking, and these traps of alternative medicine or other things of that nature. The viewer comment was specifically bringing up Steve Jobs, who died of cancer last year and had a form of cancer that was very highly curable. But or a, I guess I can't come up with the right word there, forego. He chose to forego treatment in a conventional sense and try herbal treatments and a diet that was recommended through an alternative medicine practitioner. And it didn't work. As in or to quote one of my favorite comedians, you know what they call alternative medicine that's been proven to work? Medicine. So this is one that he did not undergo the scientifically supported treatments for this very deadly form of cancer, and it killed him
Yeah.
in a way that was entirely avoidable. Well, not entirely avoidable, but very likely avoidable. Had he gone through traditional treatments, there was a very, very high likelihood that he would be alive today. So that's how dangerous these things can be. And we're talking Steve Jobs. This is not a fool. This is
Right.
somebody. I mean, sure, he created the cult of Apple, but um, that's. I understand you might be part of that cult too. I don't know. As I say this as I'm using the Mac that was given to me. So,
Yeah. Well, he
but
definitely was a go-getter, and but I probably even a control freak. Who knows? But yeah, a good example of a person who's certainly no dummy, no idiot, and yet foregoing taking a gamble. Yeah. But I think that this should humble us all in some sense. I suppose that when Steve Jobs decided to go in that alternate route, he considered himself to be a person so well informed that it was to him a very good risk. Don't we all do that?
absolutely, this is why I promote scientific reasoning so much. Is because we, as individuals, are really not as good at reasoning as we think. It's something that I have had some really, really impressive conclusions that I've come to and have been really, really impressively proven wrong by other people.
Yeah.
it's it's the kind of thing that I have biases and I'm aware of these biases. Even so, I still have them and I can't always avoid them. And part of it is that as you mentioned earlier, that I'm intelligent, and that makes me arrogant. A lot of people will argue that even me stating that I'm intelligent
Yeah.
is arrogant, and I would have to agree to some extent.
You're
So
intelligent. You're
yeah,
intelligent.
I
I think you're
certainly
intelligent. By the way, something that a story I haven't told very often, but I get a great deal of amusement out of it. When I was in eighth grade, I had a crush on my math teacher. She was hot, Miss Giovannini. She ended up marrying a history teacher in the school who was, I thought, a real creep. And boy, was I disappointed with that. Anyway, she was a delight, and she was my math teacher. And one day she told me, she said, no one has ever trisected an angle using just a straight edge and a compass. And there's some people who think it can't be done, and some people who think it can be. And for some reason, that got to me. And I worked on the problem for a couple of years. And finally, in 10th grade, I'd worked on several different possible ways of doing it. And I had a girlfriend. Let's see, who was it at the time? They go through these young, Chris O'Connor was the name. She saw this in one of my notebooks and she grabbed it. She said, "What's this?" She understood that the problem was one supposedly unsolvable. And she saw my proof and everything that I had. And she just grabbed it up and she runs down to the guidance office and she shows it to the guidance counselors there. And they're all impressed. And they take me up to one of the local colleges in the math department, and they try to take a look at it. And there's some math teacher there trying to explain to me some field concepts and showing me that it can't be done and it's impossible. And I didn't know what to make of it, and I hadn't known whether or not I'd proven it or not. Anyhow, as it turned out, we don't think so. Then, about 3 years later, the local newspaper was crediting this college professor with having developed a way of doing it. And I was angry when I saw it in the paper because I'm thinking, he's stealing my idea. But a few years later, it was all debunked that he didn't do it. It couldn't be done. And I figured, well, he saved me the embarrassment. But I love math. But, the fact that a young kid like me could try to do that and think it was be done, and then I actually fooled a math professor into thinking that I had done it, and he started trying to hail it and then even starting to get credit for it. Um, and he didn't know better. I just unwise, unintelligent. It just shows you, the kind of things that we can do. But I thought that was kind of funny.
that's a really good anecdote. Actually, that's a really, really good way to say that. And it speaks very strongly to the point in that people are easily fooled. And the only thing more difficult, or I forget the exact quote now, it's Mark Twain said, it's easy to fool somebody. It's much more difficult to convince them that they have been fooled. And that speaks volumes as well. But you know what's great about the scientific world, the scientific method, is not the structured form of it, the control. Yes, those things are all good. What's great about it is the peer review, because the very, very best way to make a name for yourself as a scientist is not to come up with a brand new theory, but to crush an old one. That's a really good way to get yourself really well known. So there is all kinds of scrutiny behind anything that somebody puts forward, and only that which that stands up to test after test after test after test, and people constantly trying to come up with different ways to prove it wrong, are the ones that are accepted as valid. And any individual can think that their idea, and is actually far more likely to think that their idea is valid because it's their idea. But peer review is the key
Yes.
to making sure that we're
It
not.
is it is helpful, but it's not entirely foolproof either. I mean, Einstein, when he first came up with his special relativity, was kind of humored, and he was, in a sense, put on a blacklist. He wanted to become a physics professor, and he ended up being, working in a patent office. Uh, but they didn't like his ideas. It wasn't until the world of physics started to come down on itself with some of the dead ends that it was working with, that they began rereading things he had said, and then but at first even a lot of things he said were rejected
Right,
as
not foolproof.
laughable.
Not by any means foolproof. As a matter of fact,
Yeah.
it's very it very much so depends upon fools, and our ability as humans to scrutinize one another and to accept new revolutionary ideas, which is something that is difficult for a lot of people to do. I mean, Einstein turned the world of physics upside down, and that was difficult for even him to accept in some ways. And
Yeah.
that
And it continues to go
it's
upside down. But you're right though about peer review on the strong side. Although peer review can go badly, it has a tendency to eventually come around and do the right thing and discover the right thing. After all, it tends to be more pragmatic.
just like any system devised using humans, um, which are not perfect and are certainly fallible in our reasoning individually, it is still subject to that on a larger scale. But when you put that many more minds on a single question, you're far more likely to avoid the biases and the things that we do wrong when we're thinking about things. And that's why peer review, no, it's not infallible by any means, but it is by far the most important part of science. That, in my opinion, there's a lot of things that are very key to doing things right. But peer review, in my opinion, has got to be the most important. Um, there's a point that I was getting to, and I'm sorry, I'm a little off.
Could you tie this
Today.
back up with what you start out with, some of the divisions that do exist within atheism? I would even want to say that I think some of those divisions are probably healthy. It keeps the atheists on their toes. They realize that they need to pursue this from a variety of ways, and I suppose that in many ways those divisions will continue.
What's interesting
It's
is
not
that
necessarily a bad thing.
the atheist community is built up of people who don't like to be told what to think. I mean, you probably get far more of this from or within those that would self-identify as atheists than any other single group, because we're all opinionated and to an extent a touch more arrogant about our ability to reason than a lot of people who are okay with being told what to believe and going to church, getting it from a pastor or a book. There are some people that certainly put far more thought into their theism. I'm happy to have a co-host that is one of those. But there's plenty of people out there who simply are complacent with being told and not thinking about it too much. And you don't find many of those in atheists. So as such, we're people who are very prone to staunchly defending our positions and in such challenging each other and coming up with divisions. I'll tell you that I have I have a very, very close friend who's an atheist, and him and I couldn't disagree more on just about anything that comes down to social theory, economics, politics. We're very, very divided on those subjects, but we're still close friends. So this division in atheism, though, is significant because it's taken on um, a more acidic tone, and that surprised me when that came around. I did not see it coming, but there's people who literally they don't like each other. They are they disrespect one another intentionally. It, there's the whole movement really started around the subject of feminism, and it came from a conference when Rebecca Watson made a speech that was later referred to as Elevator Gate. I won't go into the details, but essentially she had a guy hit on her at the conference when she was in the elevator, and it made her uncomfortable. And she talked about it and didn't single him out, but she said, guys, don't do that. It was a situation where it didn't feel safe to me, and I don't like that. And that created a very large conversation about social justice and social progress, and
empathy.
It's created a lot of people who are very, very. I mean, there's even people starting a men's rights movement and saying that men have the right to hit on women when they want to and how they want to, just like women have the right to not want them to. And I mean, there's something to be said for that, but.
Well, as long as you're also open to the idea that women have the right to shoot men, I guess we can go with that. No, just kidding. You know, the Ayn Rand objectivism, I would imagine that would be very appealing to certain atheists who, where other atheists, such as yourself, you strike me as being far away from that school of thought. It tends to be a justified form of selfishness, as I understand it, that tries to understand that it's not selfishness, it's self-centeredness as a sense of taking responsibility for the self. But, there are some people who recognize how important it is to think of others and to recognize a sense of fairness and cooperation. And these are, in many ways, very different attitudes, and hard to find people who balance them well, and usually most people go to one extreme or the other.
Those certainly are lenses through which that we view the world as well, and that's one thing
Right.
that I wanted to discuss a little bit when you talked about them, is that when we're looking through our lens to view our lens and to see if it's scratched, it's really difficult to do, to carry the metaphor what may be a step too far there, but it's almost impossible to not step outside of your own worldview to look at your worldview while you're still looking at it through your own worldview. So you have to. That's the peer review side of it again. I would argue that this anti-feminism understanding of things, this anti-affirmative action, any sort of social positivism, and the very strongly individualist understanding of the world that comes with Ayn Rand and various other philosophical self-centeredness is not accurate in what it suggests and how it would say that social interactions work. And that's something that can be tested. And that's where anybody looking within their own lens is going to have a really hard time doing that. But our worldviews are still things that are subject to testability in many ways. And this does wrap back into the topic of the show, or of the series of shows we've been doing, and the show that PZ was on is church harmful? My argument on that is that yes, it is, and specifically for that reason is that church encourages the reinforcement of your worldview and not the challenging of it. It encourages cloistering and division and positive affirmation of whatever you happen to believe, instead of the peer review process.
It's a circle the wagons, defend the faith attitude in most places. Yes.
Yes, I use the term church there in a general sense, and I will say that there certainly are some that do not follow that model. But for the most part, that's my argument there, is that yes, it is harmful itself. The function, the actual thing that a church is the community where people get together and they agree with these things and they affirm them between each other instead of going to challenge them. And you're right, the circling the wagons, I think, is a very harmful view, or a very harmful practice, a very harmful view of the world. That's all I really have for today on that. Do you have any other
no, Joey's going to get angry.
A few more minutes before they're cutting us off
his clock.
I'm sorry, I think I talked over there. I did not hear what you were just saying.
I said that Joey's going to get angry at us. We're messing up his clock.
Yeah, Joey said he's given us a few extra minutes today because we got off to the late start. But your show is coming up next, and I look forward to it. I'm going to be joining Dr. Jones again tonight from the 8 to 10 time slot. I believe we are going to have another guest by the name of Justin Connolly, and I don't know who else. You're not going to be with us.
I won't be there tonight, but I'll be back next week, and I'll be there on the 3rd as well. Yeah.
All right. Look forward to that. And the 3rd, by the way, we do have it confirmed now that Dave Silverman of American Atheists, he is the president, and actually has a meme online generated around him. It's a lot of fun. But he will be on the show from 8 to 9. He cannot do the full show. And then Eric Hovind will be in the studio as well during that same time slot. So that is March 3rd, not this coming Sunday, but the next one, 2 weeks from today. We will have them both on the show. This, I believe, is scheduled to be the last in the series of Is Church Harmful, but that doesn't necessarily mean it will be. So I look very much forward to that. Look forward to being on the show tonight and to being back next week. Thank you for joining me, Bob. Enjoy your show. I know I will. And have a good week. Join us again next week for Inspiring Honesty.